Still with us, NBC White House correspondent Monica Alba, and joining the conversation, Susan Page, the White House bureau chief for USA Today. Monica, I want to start with you. President Trump has so many critics, but Bolton really held a unique space. Talk us through how he went from working in Trump's White House to being one of his harshest critics. You and I were covering the White House together at that point.
Yeah, exactly, Allie. And remember that back in that time, there was a fair amount of turnover with the president's top advisors and in his cabinet. You would see secretaries and top officials be dismissed pretty regularly in that first year in 2017. And remember that John Bolton was his third national security advisor when he started in 2018, and he lasted about a year and a half before the president said that he asked for his resignation and ultimately left the White House. At the time, John Bolton even kind of disputed how that went down, and he wrote that he had offered his resignation and that the president had told him, we'll talk about it tomorrow. So they even had differing perspectives as John Bolton was on his way out the door. Then he wrote this book called The Room Where It Happened that detailed some of their time together in that first administration. But the president and the Trump administration was not pleased, they say, in the way that he went about getting clearance for some of the information that went ultimately into his book. So there was a dispute over that and an inquiry over that. But then, Allie, I think something that's really instructive is that that's how many years ago we're talking about, almost, right, 8-9 years ago. And even just a week ago, John Bolton is still a thorn in the president's side when it comes to his commentary about President Trump's meeting with President Putin. And we can see that reflected in President Trump's own social media messages, where he had been saying, again, just about a week ago, he was very upset, he said, with his view of how the media was covering it, and specifically included John Bolton in that, saying, constantly quoting fired losers, saying that's what reporters were doing, and, quote, really dumb people like John Bolton, who just said that even though the meeting is on American soil, Putin has already won. So, again, just another very recent example, but there have been plenty of them in recent years where the president has been an outspoken vocal critic of John Bolton, and John Bolton, for his part, has done the exact same. The two have certainly been at odds when it comes to mostly foreign policy issues. And, again, something that was important is that John Bolton was included in that group that just when the president took office this time, they were stripped of their security details and security clearances. He was among that in the first acts of when he took office.
Yeah, you're talking about the multiple pivot points in a feud that has spanned half a decade at this point. Monica Alba, thank you. And to the viewers who are looking at the house on the side of their screen, that is, of course, John Bolton's residence in Bethesda, Maryland. We have a reporter outside. We have a camera outside because, of course, that is where the FBI raid took place this morning. Susan, we have covered so many firsts when it comes to Donald Trump, but this does feel, as we heard Mary McCord talking about what it means to have a president who is saying that he's the real law enforcement authority, the real chief law enforcement officer in this country. It does feel like this is yet another norm broken in a real serious way.
You know, we had another modern president who used the justice system, the government agencies against his enemies. His name was Richard Nixon. He was forced to resign. In his aftermath, a series of reforms were enacted and signed into law, some of them to protect the justice system, to make sure it didn't happen again. But what we see happening now is so much more serious than what happened during the Nixon administration, because it's so much more public. There's nothing quiet or behind the scenes about the actions that the Trump administration is taking against his critics. It's all out there for to see. You've got live cameras watching as this search goes on in John Bolton's house. And I think one reason John Bolton so annoys the president is because he is his most credible critic. We have a lot of people willing to criticize Donald Trump. John Bolton is his longest-serving national security advisor. He spent more than a year by Trump's side. So when he speaks with real authority about how this president operates.
About how this president operates. And one of the central things that he's talked about is the way that dictators receive the president. And then, of course, criticizing Trump's own abilities as a would-be dictator. But I think you're right. The idea that the call is in some ways coming from inside the House, or at least someone who used to be inside the White House, definitely is something that ratchets up this feud in the president's mind, maybe why it's sustained for so long. But I think, what does it say to you that that right now, even if there is legitimate reason, and we don't know, there's so much we don't know about what's in this warrant, this affidavit, how the FBI came to actually raid the former National Security Advisor's home. But what does it say that there is a political piece to this that's so palpable that rides right alongside the questions about if this is a legitimate use of America's law enforcement arm?
So it's possible something will turn out to be that this was justified. This is the result of an investigation. And maybe that's true. But we have multiple examples of the administration moving against his critics. And the timing also raises some eyebrows. John Bolton has been one of the president's fiercest critics on his handling of the Ukraine-Russia war, and this sense just in the last few days, first, that there was going to be a big breakthrough, there was going to be a bilateral meeting, then a trilateral meeting, and then a settlement and a security arrangement. None of that has happened. And in fact, the possibility of progress on that war now seems, it's not impossible, but it seems pretty distant. And that was a case that John Bolton was making.